Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Minnesota Statewide Alumni Chapter's December event entitled Finances and Budgeting from Law School to the Experienced Lawyer. Happy to welcome Mike Knoeller here today. This is the Wisconsin takeover, the Minnesota Alumni Chapter. He's a former ADJ of District 10, and I'll let him introduce himself and take over here because we have a lot to cover, and really glad to have him. Feel free to ask questions. I want this to be a useful seminar for everyone, so put them in the chat if there's something you're interested in or wanting to clarify. So thanks, Mike. Take it away.
Thanks so much, Corey. Welcome, everybody. As I'm seeing people come into the room, seeing a bunch of heavy hitters with a lot of experience in the legal field. So to the extent that there were going to be law students in here, we'll run past that pretty quickly at this point because you guys are well past that stage of learning what you need to do in law school. But maybe so there's some things they'll be beneficial. So thanks again to Corey and to the Minnesota Statewide Alumni for inviting me to do this. We've done this every couple of years, especially within the district, to kind of level set and provide this experience for especially the law students as they prepare to enter. But hopefully there'll be some beneficial tips for you guys as well. So let me go ahead and share my screen, and we'll get started. As Corey mentioned, we're kind of going to be looking at this in three stages. One is the law student, which again I'll briefly go over given this crowd. Second is kind of that 5 to 10 range, which if we're not, I think most of the people in the room now, myself included, are past that stage. But there still may be some tips there, and then we'll jump right into the kind of the latter part, and feel free to ask me any questions as we get going into the area of the most experienced attorneys. So go ahead here. All right. So of course there's a disclaimer. I work for City National Bank, but I do not represent them in this capacity. So the statements I am about to make are solely my own and do not represent the views or opinions of my employer. Any reference to underlying policies, procedures, or viewpoints held in common with City National Bank are purely coincidental. Further, I am not a certified financial planner. Therefore, the information presented is not meant to convey legal or financial advice. And if you do seek financial advice, please seek the counsel of a certified financial planner on your specific situation. All right, so as a general overview, and I think I've mentioned this a couple of times, we'll just be going from the beginnings to kind of getting started to the most experienced here. And yes, I did create this initially during baseball season, so but I'm not going to change it for football because it just makes more sense. Anyway. So as I mentioned, we'll cover this in pretty quick detail. I just wanted to jot down some areas, hopefully that'd be useful for law students, and as you guys maybe as an advisory. What I am always telling people is to take a class in personal income tax, class in finance, and the statistic I always love to tell people is that those with any type of financial background who are able to help their clients that much more typically earn 6 times more over the course of their careers than those that are not able to provide that financial background. Take advanced class, and I mean, I don't think that there's a single one among us that has not probably had even a family member ask about trust and estates, correct? Learning another language. I think in this day and age, especially as I don't even say as we're becoming more global, I think we're already there. Having another language in your back pocket always a benefit. And developing good preventative health. I always throw this in as a last resort, or as a last note, not as a last resort, as a last note, because preventative health is rarely used. It only amounts to about 15% of the total amount that's used. In other words, for all the money that we put into our health savings accounts that we're paying out of pocket for our health insurance, we're actually only using about 15% of that on preventative maintenance. There's a ton of waste, but then we ended up spending 7 times more than that if we need to use it for care later in life. So it literally is, well, not literally, but it is a ounce of prevention, pound of cure situation here. I'm curious, and Corey, I don't know if we can just open up the lines to anybody who wants to jump in here. If there's any additional things that you guys may tell, especially young students that may not be on this list, in terms of what to kind of focus on when you're starting out.
Feel free to unmute and jump in.
Guys, I'll throw one in there.
Yeah.
My peeve lately is lawyers who prefer writing emails to picking up the telephone, and they don't seem to be willing to discuss their case over the telephone. I would encourage any lawyers that are on this call that are getting started in practice not to sit down and stress and worry about what's going to be in an email that I write, because an email is going to follow you around forever. If you just pick up the phone and talk with the lawyer, it may not be a perfect telephone call, but I think you're going to have a better relationship with that lawyer down the road to eventually get that case resolved.
No, it's great. 100% agree.
My advice would be to start figuring out what's going on with your loans before you get out of law school, and what that's going to look like when you have to start repaying them, because that can be a big shock for a lot of folks, especially given first year attorney salaries these days compared to inflation.
Yeah, so that's a great segue into our next part. So you've been out, and then you've pretty much been cut. You know, you enter the big leagues and you've basically already been cut. So 80% of borrowers say that student loan debt has influenced their choice of job. I know from anecdotal experience, I've seen it where people are taking jobs that they say, I want to go into this field, but I can't afford it. Or I had no idea that litigation in a criminal law defense law firm was going to pay so little, or working at a nonprofit was going to pay me that little. I think I need more because I'm an attorney, right? So yes, I agree, Corey, that they need to have an idea of where their income is going to be coming from before they leave school, and have a better idea of the market. And we'll get to that a little bit in more detail in just a moment as well. I thought this was, I think it's also telling, though, in terms of those who are hiring, or those who speak with other attorneys about their hiring practices, because there's a higher proportion of Black, Hispanic, and Indigenous borrowers that focus on loan forgiveness as a major factor in job selection. Here in Milwaukee, and I'll show you the statistic that'll back this up in just a moment, there's a greater proportion of people that are looking at flexibility in their jobs. They'll still take the low-paying jobs, but they need flexibility so that they can work a second job in order to do this. There's a great restaurant here in Milwaukee that they pretty much exclusively hire first and second year attorneys as their bartenders, because they're all friends and they have good referrals back to the restaurant. And they do this while also working for a local nonprofit, which pays them significantly less than what they were even getting in student loans in law school. So let's keep moving on, because here we go. 164,742 national average law school debt in 2020. That's fun, right? I've had this statistic in the past as well for District 10 exclusively, and I put where the debt to income ratio is the lowest as well as the highest. So Stanford has the lowest at 0.77, where you actually are making the average income is more than your average debt, which, you know, that's a good thing, right? And then there's Florida Coastal, where you have significantly more debt leaving law school than you are making. Actually, the lowest on here was John F. Kennedy University with a 6.45 DTI, but it definitely seemed like an outlier because the median income was only $18,100 for an education that costs upwards of $160,000. So it seemed a little bit strange in terms of where those statistics may be coming from to get that median income. So at bare minimum, you can see a 5.63 at the bottom, and everybody else is kind of somewhere in the middle. And this is the slide that that I mentioned in terms of supporting where and why attorneys tend to find secondary jobs when they're entering the market, because Marquette's right here at the bottom of District 10 in terms of 53,000 starting out. Median debt is 154, and the job that I mentioned at the time, so this is 10 years ago, but it was paying 26.5. So there we go. And hopefully to circle back to the point that Ed made as well, in terms of reaching out specifically and having that conversation. I think we certainly as alumni, because unless I'm seeing differently, I think we're all alumni on this call right now, can be invaluable resources for the sole purpose of providing the information to our law school chapters about what the financial market is. I mean, let's take out the subject matter expertise that we can provide, but simply you're going into criminal defense. I pick on criminal defense because my dad was a criminal defense attorney for 45 years. That was it's not a money-making area of the law predominantly. And so from that perspective, he was able to steer many people in the right direction to say, I love my profession. I love what I do. I love the clients that I can help, but be prepared to not be making six figures right out of law school. And so from that perspective, hopefully you guys can set expectations. There have been tons and tons of studies that have been done. And at this point, I think it's setting the expectations for the students, where they anticipate that because they have a law degree that they're going to be able to buy the house, buy the car, take the fancy vacation, go to Bora Bora and study for the LSATs, for the bar exam. That's not feasible. Another quick story on that is there was a guy in law school that he received his offer from a medium-sized firm. Medium-sized firms here in Milwaukee is probably in the $60,000 to $70,000 range. And he decided to take the offer letter and go buy a house and a car. And before graduation, he actually got arrested for a felony. And so he lost the offer, but he still had that debt, still that nice little debt. But it was the expectation that he had a good job. He'd go in there without realizing, oh, I have this underlying debt. So let's delve a little bit deeper into that then. Because at this point is normally where I start talking about law school debt and how to cover it. But really, I shifted things around mostly because as students coming out, I think it's the one thing that they fear the most. And it's probably, I won't say it's the least thing that they need to worry about, but it's going to be there for a while. And especially over the last 10 years or so that I've been giving this presentation, there is a focus on that law school debt while simultaneously putting aside the need to just be more financially responsible in general. And if you can balance your law school debt with everything else, you'll be in a much stronger position than just trying to figure out, how do I pay off this debt, and having everything else fall by the wayside. And especially, I will bring this up now, in 2020 and carrying over into 2021 due to the pandemic, we'll see exactly why that is such a big focus to look at the big picture. So going back pre-pandemic, 46% of people spent more than they made on a monthly basis. So that's that whole living paycheck to paycheck. And beyond that, they're spending more than what they're bringing in. 57% of Americans have less than $1,000 in savings, which is actually down from 2019. So that was a 2020 statistic. It's down. But 50% of Americans don't have $600 to cover an unplanned expense or emergency. We absolutely saw this, and in the financial world, there was a huge gap, huge divide between essentially the haves and the have-nots. Those with plenty of savings who continue to save even more, and those who had high credit card bills who were subsequently spending more on those bills, but then because they were not taking trips, that the amount of money that they were spending on their everyday necessities increased, but they were not using those credit cards for discretionary spending. And so as a result, they were actually able to pay off those credit cards faster, which created a bigger hole in the financial world, because as people pay those credit cards down, there are less fees, there's less interest that can be collected, which is also why, if you've noticed, or maybe you haven't, the increase in the credit card commercials offering even greater incentives than they have in the past, and being even more creative about the offers and the incentives that they are providing, because there are things like travel, dining, that have taken a real hit in terms of what banks can provide for those incentives. 41% of Americans use a budget, and I typically tend to shy away from the term budget. I think it's just fiscal responsibility. I think budget tends to hem people in too quickly. But what I do advise is to write down your fixed monthly cost to find out how much you can reasonably save. Because from that standpoint, then the first thing that's going to go into there is to save. Then figure out what's going to be then your bills to pay, and then finally what your discretionary spending is going to be. So I always say pay yourself first. Once you figure out what your monthly costs are, pay yourself first. Easy as that.
I just want to jump in here quickly, Mike. How does debt factor into this? How do you factor in paying down debt with your monthly budget and saving and all these other things?
So it depends on how much debt you actually have. When you're starting out, it could be a simple formula of paying no more than 30% of your budget on housing, paying no more than X amount on food. Those are calculations that you're going to have to figure out. Now, food is a bad example of what I just said in terms of fixed costs. It's actually that's discretionary. But there are, and I'll go through in just a second in terms of, actually, let me jump ahead to here, in terms of what your fixed costs are going to be. There's a bare minimum, there's a base minimum of food, which is usually calculated about $300 per month. I actually think that's a little bit high if you're by yourself. But there are these other costs that you need to be considering before you even get down to student loan. Your long-term debt, which is another reason why I think you need to consider whether or not you can afford that house, whether or not you can afford that car, whether or not you can afford that large vacation right now. Because once you get done paying with your housing, if you need a car, or if you already have a car and you need to be paying for gas, parking, tolls, etc., to get to your job, you're going to be needing to pay for healthcare, utilities, rent if you don't own, taxes, insurance. All those things need to be baked in before you even consider what your debt, what your student loan debt. Because I think, Corey, correct me if I'm wrong, is that really the question? Is your student loan debt?
Well, not just paying it all off, but making monthly payments and things like that.
Yeah. So your student loan debt really should just be one more component of the of your total monthly costs. And because this is such a large figure, your student loan debt, especially from law school, is going to be such a large figure, presumably, compared to everything else. With the potential exception of housing, if you're able to purchase a house right out of law school and you're not paying rent, that's probably going to be one of your largest areas of debt. But don't put it above anything else. I think that's where law students and early lawyers get hung up, is that they're focused on all those things and saying, I paid off my student loans, but now I don't have enough to pay my rent, or to pay for enough groceries, or to pay my utilities, or to get gas. And now I have to, I don't have enough in my savings to pay for a car payment, and my car just broke down. So don't look at it in terms of it's just one component. It's just one component of a larger budget.
Didn't mean to
Please.
get you off track. I was just listening to Supreme Court arguments, and I was feeling like a justice for a second. But yeah, keep going. You're doing great.
Please. We'll open up all this for all questions, because this is great. Because the other component I mentioned, fixed costs back here, and then you also have your discretionary spending. And I think by and large, this gets commingled too much, where you say, oh, I have this amount for my food budget. I'll just eat out rather than make my own food. Or I'm making money now, so I can continue to, or I can start to pay for repairs to be done. Well, can you really? Can you really pay for that? I think the bottom line, and what I always try to encourage students to do, is really critically think about your other skills. DIY as much as you can early on. Save that money. I have somebody that's worked at my at US Bank back in the day, that he purchased a home. I mean, he was making very good money. He got a promotion, and he said, well, I bought the extended warranty on all my appliances. I was like, oh, why did you do that? Because your extended warranty costs more than what your appliances did. He's like, because I don't know how to fix anything. Okay, well, what you're spending per month can most likely go into, you maybe consider putting that into your savings account instead, and saving that for when you need it, as opposed to just spending that money right away. Again, just like that, or just like law school debt, it's just one more component to consider. Now, I always say this, and I think that there are plenty. I still don't know if there are any law students that are out there, but as we get older, I think our discretionary spending certainly increases. And from a mental health standpoint, and especially after going through and still being in a pandemic, I think it's very reasonable to think that $6 cup of Starbucks is mandatory. You need it to get through reading those briefs. That bottle of wine is going to get you through the night. Whatever the case may be, if it's a short-term reward, by all means, you have to, you live within your means, but don't be so strict that you're saving at the expense of actually living your life. So that's not what I'm trying to convey. But but that being said, be mindful of your larger goals as well. Do you want to take that slightly larger vacation? Maybe cutting down on the $60 extra HBO package might be the way to do that. So here's the part where hopefully, as you're getting some additional experience, you're going to be saving a bunch in your 30s, and where you can really take a chunk out of your student loans. And Corey, I promise I have not forgotten about the underlying question about reducing debt. So we'll get to that here. So realistically assess the next 5 to 10 years of your career. I think that's very difficult for people to do once they're in their job, but I also think it's very realistic for people to get a sense of what their worth is and to really investigate the market for getting a better idea for where their talents lie and the money. I mean, that's what it comes down to, right? Being paid for what you're worth. I can honestly say this is an exercise I just went through myself, where I had to look and think, do I want to stay in a position, or do I want to stay in my current position, or do I want to look for something else where there's going to be greater growth opportunity, both financially and developmentally, and what's out there, right? And we're seeing the great resignation right now, I believe it's called, of people doing exactly that, trying to find their best fit for what they're worth. Again, we're going to revisit the student loans, and we'll take a closer look at that in just a second. View the money movement. So this is not just looking at debt now, but income. And then first and foremost, looking at that low-hanging fruit. So as I started to talk about, what are your options? What do you want to save for? I encourage you to save. I've encouraged students to save even as little as they can for things. And in previous discussions, I've mentioned trying to do a third, and a third. So something that you're going to save for a long term, something that you have a mid-range goal, and something that you may want to try to save to purchase it within the next 6 months. At this point, 5-10 years out, I think that those goals as well as the wishes get slightly larger, right? I know my daughter's that way right now, where she originally wanted a Cabbage Patch Kid when she was 4, and now she says, "Can I have that $700 phone?" Yeah, start working for it. So, and then the other component of it is, what are you working for? This is the part to also consider. Maybe you want to start your own law firm because you're bringing in clientele. You know the market. You certainly know the subject matter. Is that an area that you want to delve into and start your own business? Do you want to change practices? And the difference in lifestyles that different areas of law can provide. But at this point, it's all about perspective. And the reason why I have the two pizzas there is, again, kind of going with that baseball theme. Yogi Berra was once asked the question. He went into a pizza place and ordered an entire pizza, and the pizza person said, "Would you like your pizza cut into 6 slices or 8?" And he said, "Cut it into 6 because I don't think I could eat 8." So I bring that up just to have some perspective, right? It's all one big pie, but it's how you want to carve it out for yourself that's going to be the most crucial thing. And I also advise, and I think if you don't have it already, start to develop your team of advisors to walk you through finance, through business planning if you need that assistance, where you don't have to go it alone, and you're right in that transition of being a mentee to a mentor. I've learned as much from a formal mentoring program, being the mentor, as I have ever being a mentee. So I'd encourage you guys to consider that as well. And here we go. Because we had talked about debt for so long, I think I could take off at this point student loans and really just apply this to any large scale debt that you have, with the exception of maybe your house, where that's kind of a fixed cost, with the exception of refinancing. But we won't get into that. We'll focus on student loans for the moment. And as I mentioned at the outset, this is an area that normally I put at the very beginning because it's the biggest debt that students have. But I put it here because for the most part, it just needs to be one component. I said it before and I'll say it again. It's just one component of what needs to be your overall financial plan. If you can't afford to pay the student loan debt at whatever the full value is that the student loan agencies are wanting to charge you, have that conversation with them. I've renegotiated my even on a income-driven repayment plan. I've called and I've had discussions with the agencies, and I've said, this is completely unrealistic. And they said, well, based on what? Well, based on my income, based on my fixed spending. There's no way that I can pay this without being in default. Okay, well, what can you pay? What's realistic for you to pay? There are these options. The worst thing that they don't want is to have you stop paying altogether. This part down here where I say you're not alone. This is all people who they saw that final total of owing $100,000 or more, said, I can't pay it. Why am I paying anything if I'm never going to be able to cut down this debt? Or maybe I've been paying for a few years. Why is it that my total payment is still higher than what it was when I was in school? There's no way I'm going to pay that off. Well, the underlying point is have the discussions, pick up the phone, have a conversation, set reasonable guidelines for what you're able to pay. Keep paying, because there's a big penalty for default on these. So pay something. I'm not suggesting that you pay nothing. Pay something. But at the end of the day, it just needs to be another component of your overall budget. I'm going to pause there because I'm curious to see, like I say, especially with the alumni that we have here, if there are any additional tips or if somebody had a question or other comment.
I have a question, Mike. So
yeah,
some money gurus would tell you to pay off debt first and avoid new spending or saving until that's done. Others will say debt is good. You got to spend money to make money. Do you agree with one of those approaches, or is there a hybrid approach you would recommend just generally?
I generally do apply a hybrid approach, which is if you can pay off or even limit your high interest spending. So one of the things that I did right out of law school, I actually had a job and a different career before I went into law school. And then when I came out, I actually lowered my my credit limits on my credit cards, because based on what I was making at the time, I wanted to ensure that I could pay those off on a monthly basis, and not just rely on that additional credit to live off of. But that being said, savings first. Absolutely pay yourself first. Otherwise, you'll never achieve the level of savings that you want. If you keep paying, there's always going to be an additional cost for something. And if there's not, you're going to want to take that vacation. You're going to buy that bauble. You're going to want to, I don't know what, you're going to want to spend it, right? Because what little money you have, you're going to say, well, I can purchase this, as opposed to I'm going to save that. So from my hybrid approach, save first, pay down those high interest credit cards. But by and large, credit's fine, especially in this stage, at this stage of the game. If you're 5-10 years in, hopefully you've established enough of a steady income where you're making significantly more. And by significantly, I just mean the inverse of living paycheck to paycheck and not having any savings. So you at least hopefully have that $600 in the bank. Ideally, you should have between 3 and 6 months in savings at any point in time for emergencies. I mean, mine is an all-encompassing bucket of, it's in case I were to lose my job and I need to still pay the bills. I know what my outgoing expenses are on a monthly basis, and I've saved 8 times that much to cover me for 8 months. Now, maybe I won't need that. You know, right now, knock on wood, you know, I've been at my job for just a little under 2 months. I don't anticipate using that. So that's now in my head, just going to emergency funds. Maybe I'm going to need a new washer and dryer soon. Maybe I'm going to need to, I don't know what, maybe roof repairs because the snow is coming, whatever that might be. Now that's an emergency fund for home repairs. But having that money in reserve allows you a lot of flexibility. Whereas if you are paying off your debt first before you engage in savings, I think you only do yourself a disservice. Because there's also the time value of your own money, so that hopefully you have enough eventually, you know, put into your 401k, put it in an IRA, in contact a financial advisor and you know, create a portfolio for yourself, that type of thing. Even a little bit is going to go much farther than just you paying off your debt, because again, it's always going to be there.
That's great. I didn't know you could reduce your credit limit. Seems like the credit card companies are always increasing them exponentially as long as your balance is low.
They are, because that's, I mean, so the crazy part about all of one of the crazy parts among other crazy parts within the pandemic is the amount of incentives that banks specifically have offered through their credit card programs, because so many people have been paying it off. Now there's a huge, I won't say disparity, but there are 2 schools of thought in terms of what has been going on in the financial world between those who we've seen have increased their credit card use, and those who've been able to pay off the balances of their credit cards because their discretionary spending has gone from using their credit cards for everything to next to nothing. So that creates a problem from a money flow standpoint in and out of banks, because in one sense you see people paying off their debt, but on the flip side of it, you see people not investing, not putting money into their savings account, which is a good and a bad thing at the same time when you think about what the interest rates are when banks are offering cash back, right? I'm sure everybody's seen those cash back, or 2% cash back on every purchase at what, Capital One, I think it is. Yeah, that's more than you're getting in a savings account, right? So it makes some sense to use credit wisely. And as I kind of get into the end here, to focus on that, you know, putting something in just a regular old savings account, great way to start. Put it away. You know, that's your rainy day fund that you're not going to touch. Also, just not knowing what the availability of banks are on any given day. I used to do. I had a mortgage at Bank of America once upon a time. Another quick story. Bank of America, they said, well, you have to come down to Chicago in order to access your funds through one of our branches. Like, I'm in Milwaukee. I'm not going to drive down on a Sunday at 7 a.m. in order to get a couple $1,000s. That's not, and I did it because I had to do it. but that's not convenient. So having some reserves in cash as well is also something I recommend to everybody. And in terms of reviewing income as well as expenses, I always advise people to do this on a quarterly basis. So I literally have a sheet of paper right here showing my monthly expenses. I'll review it on a quarterly basis just to figure out where my money is going and to see if it's still in line. I know I've mentioned this in the past to students in terms of auto pay. Anything that's really a fixed income, car payments, comes to mind first and foremost, is something that you can put on auto pay. It's going to be the same amount of money every month, as opposed to your cable bill or your electric bill, and because you're going to want to monitor those more, or you should monitor those more closely. And then as you start to look into additional revenue streams for your income, to have a talk with a financial advisor on an annual basis. Again, you're just developing that team around you.
So this is sort of a different direction, but as far as those who have their own firm or are thinking about starting their own business, I know this could be its own seminar, but can you talk briefly about savings for business and preparing for self-employment taxes and paying yourself versus investing in your business?
Absolutely. So part of the, you know what, I'm actually going to defer. I'm going to defer here because we have a couple of people who have their own business. So does somebody else want to weigh in on this, or would anybody like to? I can have my own, but I think there's a good opportunity for somebody else if they'd like to weigh in on their own business.
I want to hear how Ed Anderson manages his finances. That's what I want to hear. But and also I have a question too, Mike. When we're done kind of talking about this, I would like to know just any tips you have on picking a good financial advisor, because the ones that I run into always seem like they're in some sort of pyramid scheme and like are really interested in selling me stuff versus kind of what would be best for my financial health. It always feels like, because they want you to refer them to like 5 friends and all of that stuff. So tips on that would be good. But yeah.
Yep.
Well, I'll speak from my limited experience and then just kind of let you know what questions I had.
Yeah.
But I found it's very good to make quarterly estimated payments for taxes, to save a little in your business account just for expenses that come out, computer breaks, something like that happens. I still haven't really gotten into all of the tax planning and the S Corp, and probably need to talk to an accountant about that. But if anybody has any tips on paying yourself versus getting some business expenses, buying some new equipment, things like that, be happy to hear it.
Corey, has anybody ever recommended to you the Profit First book? Because that's one, and it's on my list of things to do because I definitely don't have all those pieces figured out either. But a lot of those folks in the Lawyer on the Beach, there seems to be kind of some division, but Profit First is like one way to go about paying yourself. And then also like what you should have. But I think it's in terms of like what you should have set aside too. It's kind of like what Mike was saying, where you have 3 to 6 months set aside for expenses if something were to happen. And I think especially for us who are solos, it makes sense to have at least 3 to 6 months set aside for your business expenses too. Because like if you or I get COVID and can't take new clients for a while, like that is going to have a significant impact on our bottom line for sure. So having that kind of backup would be helpful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I see Ed has his hand raised, so I want to jump into him, but I just wanted one quick point to follow up on Sarah. I would err on the side of 6. My dad, like as I mentioned, that he was criminal defense, and he was also a solo. So that's where I have that background of running a solo practice, and 6 months is at bare minimum. Because first you need to know what your general income stream is going to be. You know, is it going to be 1 or 2 clients a month, or is it going to be 1 or 2 clients a week? What's your workload? What do you anticipate bringing in? And then from there, you need to be saving anywhere from, you know, it could be 50-50, meaning 50% is going to the business, 50% is going to your pocket. Probably is going to be more like 30-30-30, meaning 30% is going to be going to save for your business, 30% is going to be in your operating expenses, and 30% ideally could be going to you. So that's my 2 cents. Ed.
I'll share a tip with you guys that my CPA gave me several years ago, and it's to take the standard deduction. What I do is I take standard deductions in odd years and I itemize in even years. And it would seem like at first I thought, well, why? Because it's always the same. And he explained to me there's certain things that you can pay, and it doesn't matter which year you pay it in. You can pay your property taxes in the fall of this year. You can pay them in the spring of next year. It doesn't really matter. But the things you can itemize, he said, pay those to the greatest extent possible in that year that you plan to itemize. And then don't pay any, and that includes charitable deductions. You know, you can double up on your, you know, contributions of the Phi Alpha Delta Foundation. You can double up on your tithing at church. And then during the other years, when you're taking the standard deduction, don't make any of those because you've already doubled up from the prior year. You can do this with advertising. My state doesn't let you pay bar dues in certain different times of the year, but California does. You can pay them in December, January, they don't care. So the things you can pay them ahead. So you're paying them twice in the year you take itemized deductions. Don't pay them at all. And that year you take standard deduction. You end up with a bigger number coming off of your 1040, you know, a lower standard of income on the 1040 during those years that you can take those double deductions. I'll also throw something in that I see with self-employed people, and it has to do with Social Security disability. And typically I will see self-employed people who underreport their income or do strategic things to make their income lower. When they're doing that, they're paying less in self-employment taxes. And if you haven't come across self-employment taxes, they're awful. But when you pay those, you're buying insurance from the Social Security Administration. You're paying into your retirement. And those people, Sarah can probably back me up on this, when they become disabled and they file for benefits, they find that their monthly benefit is pretty damn low because they haven't paid into the system along the way. So as best you can, you know, report your income accurately, and that'll help you should you ever become disabled and need to take Social Security disability.
Yeah. Also get a long-term disability policy because it's ridiculous to not have it. And I can tell you it will take sometimes more than a year to get Social Security disability. And a lot of people are not financially stable enough to not have any income for that length of time.
Yeah. Last tip I will throw in there in terms of savings then, when we're looking at retirement, I think having a solo practice completely changes, or potentially could completely change how you view that term retirement. It may not be in your best interest to put something in a 401k because you can't touch it. That being said, you're reaching out to your financial advisor and you're saying, I have this account that I want to use as my retirement. Again, it's not going to lower your gross tax at the end of the year, meaning you're going to be paying for that right now. But that, you know, and I am a little bit averse of using IRAs personally because of the tax implications on those. But from a retirement standpoint, having a portfolio that you're just consistently dumping money into, and should you need it as a solo to be able to have that liquidity component of it, I think is much more feasible than if perhaps you are working for a company that has a 401k or has an IRA program, where typically I think this day and age they're going to offer some sort of match, and then you're going to want to capitalize on that because that's your best option. for the long-term savings. And I always put this here. Don't worry, I did the math on here. 80% of $120,000, which is or 80% of 150 is 120. If you're using a 4% rule as a guideline, you'd need about $3 million to retire. If you're there already, great. I see Ed smiling, so I think he's there. But the prime wage earning years are between 40 and 60, and especially as you have additional income to work with, the compounding of that interest as you save more during the years of 40 and 60 can bring you up there pretty quickly. So plenty of time to catch up.
Mike, how do you recommend that solos save for retirement? Savings accounts, interest is low, CDs are pretty low. Retirement accounts can be tricky. What do you recommend?
Diversify. I will suggest diversify as much as possible at this point, even in a small manner, as opposed to putting your money into Bitcoin. That's I say Bitcoin because it's top of mind. It's like what, $60,000 a share or whatever that is. But as opposed to putting your money into one stock. In fact, I just had a conversation with a buddy of mine who is a certified financial advisor, who said, and he's actually since retired, but he said, if I had to go back and advise clients, I might just suggest that they go with a Fortune 500 portfolio. You know that they're generally blue chip stocks. The rates of return are usually between 6 and 8%, and it's stable because those portfolios are diversified between real estate, between bonds, between the international market and the domestic market. So your level and tolerance for risk is going to change those the percentages of what you have in your portfolio, but that'd be the place that I would recommend to start from a retirement perspective. We talked about most of this already in terms of right side spending. I'll just touch on the point of 55% of Americans dipped into their savings, which I think is not surprising in this day and age, because you just didn't know what businesses, especially as a solo, you didn't know what business was coming in the door. Hopefully you had that savings, right? What was kind of surprising though, on the flip side, were the relative number of bankruptcies that did not occur, meaning that there was a large population of quote unquote experts who thought that there would be a great deal of bankruptcies, a lot of delinquencies. That still may occur, since this pandemic is going on even longer than the analysts were predicting. So that still may occur, but it hasn't happened yet. Which means that I bring that up only to say that there's still plenty of opportunities to invest and to take advantage of low interest rates to both increase your revenue streams as well as decrease your debt and lock yourself in. So key takeaways: track your spending, set some goals, save something or anything, and then ask for advice, develop your team. Any questions or anything else that somebody would like to? I'll jump back into Sarah's question for just a second, in terms of saying that when you're seeking a financial advisor, make sure that they're a certified financial advisor. I don't really have a best practice for seeking them out. Those who are able to advise you on differences. So not just the investment component, but also perhaps looking at your insurance. You mentioned insurance before, disability insurance, whole insurance versus just your term life insurance. People that can advise you in that capacity. Those with kids, investing, it's a good time right now to buy whole life insurance, especially those who may have been affected by COVID. I'm not touting Northwestern Mutual by any means, but and I don't know if their policy changed, but I can share with you that I purchased whole life policies on my kids when my financial advisor said there aren't going to be any additional changes to the qualifications needed to apply for whole life insurance. Because my question to them was, isn't COVID going to be one of those long-term cases where it's a pre-existing condition? If you're a long hauler, isn't that going to be considered a pre-existing condition? My financial advisor said that was discussed at Northwestern, not right now. So take advantage of it, right? So my kids don't have any pre-existing conditions. They qualify for a great program, and buy that whole life insurance. It's only going to increase with time. So not just another consideration.
Well, any other quick questions in these last few minutes, or final thoughts, Mike?
Well, I just want to say thank you to everybody. I'd be curious. I'm always curious. Please, like I said, given the audience that we had here today, if there are things that I missed, I don't know my own blind spots in this area, especially giving this topic to a younger law school crowd. They're asking different questions, but I'm sure that you guys have given this presentation as well, and have the knowledge and experience. So I'd love to get everybody's feedback. If you'd like to send that to me, love to get it. So beyond that, just thank you to everybody for participating, and Corey for inviting me.
Thank you, Mike, for sharing your time and expertise. I've seen a lot of similar presentations, but I don't think I've seen any this comprehensive. So I don't think we could have included more in the time that we had. And if students are looking for more detail on student loans, I know there are some CLEs out there on that. This recording will be posted on the Facebook page and the PAD website. Thanks to everyone for attending. This is going to be our last event of the calendar year, so enjoy the holidays and look out for a wellness event in the spring. Thanks, everyone.